What's up, YouTube? Welcome back to Celio's Network. Today we're going to break down the Mew V Max Genesect V archetype and discuss how to defeat it. It's been a while since I think we've had a clear best deck in format, and we certainly do with Mew V Max in the Fusion Strike standard format, so it's a perfect time to bring back this type of video, which I love making. We're going to dissect this archetype and talk about several different ways, either direct or indirect, and strategies you can implement into many different styles of decks to try to defeat the best deck in format, Mew V Max Genesect V, if you're choosing to not play it yourself. Before we get into that, shout out to PotownStore.com, the best place to get PTCGO codes, and CardTrooperGames.com, where you can get booster boxes and singles. Use code CELIO for 5% off at both of those websites, and you can find all of my standard format deck lists that I currently have built over at PokemonCard.io. Links for all of that is in the description down below, and be sure to subscribe to the channel for daily Pokemon TCG content. Let's talk about Mew V Max Genesect. This is the deck that we're going to discuss how to beat today. So let's break down the archetype. First off, the main cards of the deck. Mew V Max is going to be the main attacker. Oh, also, I've taken a winning list that kind of sums up what most lists are looking like right now. This was piloted by the user named Galisapod014, and this is kind of just a good breakdown of what lists are looking like right now. So Mew VMAX, 310 HP, VMAX, Psychic type, so it's hitting for Psychic weakness, it's weak to Dark. We're really just breaking down the basics here. It has free retreat, it's resistant to fighting. It does have a shred style attack, so Max Miracle can go through effects, but it only does 130, so that's something to keep in mind. And its main numbers that it will be swinging for with Cross Fusion Strike is Techno Blast for 210 or 220 with Vitality Band, and then multiples of 30 times 4 with the Power Tablets. But a lot of times those Power Tablets are not all going to come at the same time, and they will be broken up or spaced out. So one time they might hit for 240, the next time they might use 3 and hit for 300, or with a Vitality Band for 310. They can't hit over 270. They can hit 270 twice in one game if they're using Vitality Band both times, but they can't hit higher than that more than once a game. And then they have the Psychic Leap attack they can copy from the Mew V, which does 70 and shovels it back into the deck. They also have Latias's Dyna Barrier, 70, and then that Mew VMAX can't be hit by damage from a VMAX Pokemon next turn. So those are the basics of Mew VMAX. Let's just keep in mind, weak to Dark, free retreat, has a shred attack, but it's very low damage, and they can one-shot VMAXs, but typically only once a game. Genesect V is mostly a bench sitter in this archetype, but with the help of Fusion Energy and Elisa's Sparkle, it can attack sometimes when it's needed to. Genesect V is going to be the main engine of the deck with Fusion Strike system. It allows you to draw cards until you have as many cards in your hand as you have Fusion Strike Pokemon in play. So this ability is very good for the deck. It's very important for the deck to be using because their draw supporter engine is non-existent because they're relying on Fusion Strike system. So they rely on Peony to dump the hand, get 2 cards, and then use Fusion Strike system from there. And the Techno Blast 210 attack is what they will be copying with Cross Fusion Strike a lot of the time. Note they don't have any single prize attackers. Well, they have Latias, but that can't really combat other single prize attackers well. Genesect V is their 2 prize attacker, but that really can't combat and trade well with single prizers because they can only set up 2 maximum Genesect Vs in a game that can attack, and the second one's quite hard to set up sometimes and actually get going in time. So what I'm alluding to there is they probably have a hard time trading favorably with a single prize deck that can stream attackers because they do have to use their VMAX most of the time to be taking knockouts back and forth. This list here has 8 special energies and 2 basic. I don't think that's very rare. I've seen some with 7 special energies and 3 basic. I've even seen 4 special, 2 basic, the lower count of energy some lists have, but keep in mind the typical list right now has about an 80% 20% split, heavy on the special energy. So there is another thing to keep in mind. A lot of lists are running 4 stadiums. Some have cut down to 3, like you'll see here, just because they can go fetch them with Peony. Their ways to retreat their Pokemon are the free retreat from UV Max, Cross Switcher, Switch, Air Balloon. Some will play like 1 escape rope. They typically play 0 tool removal. There's typically no scrapper or tool jammer in these decks, at least the popular lists that I have been coming across and seen in tournaments. So that's the breakdown of Mew VMAX Genesect V. Now great, what does all that mean? That's what the rest of the video is about. So we're going to look at the direct counters I've identified and the indirect counters I've identified for the Mew VMAX deck. The direct counters are going to be counters that counter the Mew VMAX deck specifically because of the dark typing, and the indirect counters will be a little more abstract than just big damage hit dark weakness on Mew. So let's get into that. Some of the main direct counters we'll be talking about here. We've got Eternatus VMAX, which comes with a whole slew of other dark Pokemon. We've got Single Strike Urshi Umbreon, which the Urshi side of things the Urshi side of things is not all that great at all against Mew VMAX, but the Umbreon V and Umbreon VMAX are excellent versus Mew VMAX. And then, of course, Gengar VMAX variants, there's quite a few different ways to build it. Typically, you're going to be using Houndooms to accelerate Single Strike energy onto it. But this hits Mew for dark weakness as well, just like Umbreon does. So these are 3 big counters to the Mew VMAX. Regardless of how you're building these decks, they're going to counter Mew VMAX just because they have pretty high HP on their main attackers, and they can knock out Mew VMAX pretty handedly. And they can also knock out the Genesect Vs pretty well too if they just like send up a Genesect V for a turn to wall you off or to keep you away from the Mew VMAX. Genesect V is pretty easy for any of these decks to take care of as well. More direct counters, we have the new Galarian Obstagoon, which is kind of a double counter because it's a single prizer that's going to trade favorably and it's hitting for weakness. The issue is getting that ping damage down, and can be tricky actually because of the Fusion Strike energy. So I don't think Galarian Obstagoon is as strong against Mew as those other decks we just looked at are actually, but it is definitely strong against Mew. And then the Galarian Weezing deck, not only because of Galarian Weezing, because Weezing actually doesn't do damage, so it doesn't inflict damage, it's multiplied by weakness, but the attackers that accompany Galarian Weezing are typically going to be like Galarian Moltres V and Sableye V, the new Hoopa V, things like that. So they all hit Mew VMAX for weakness, so the Galarian Weezing type, archetype itself is going to be good against Mew VMAX. And lastly, Galarian Moltres V. Galarian Moltres V can kind of be just tossed in to a lot of decks. You toss in 2 or 3 Moltres, make sure you have a good count of Quick Ball and Research, discard Dark Energy, toss in 4 or 5 Dark Energy, maybe an Energy Switch or 2, which is exactly what we see Cash did here with his list. He performed pretty well in a recent event with in this Leafeon VMAX deck. So Leafeon VMAX has a problem against Mew because Mew has free retreat, and Leafeon VMAX wants the opponent to have high retreat. Well, Galarian Moltres gets slapped into there, and Aura Burn one-shots Mew VMAX, and that's really nice. So Galarian Moltres V can be just tossed into a deck along with a couple of its cards to come along with it, like we'll see here as well. KVI piloted this Galarian Galarian Urshifu. I knew something sounded wrong. Rapid Strike Urshifu VMAX Galarian Moltres V deck. Again, we'll see the 2 Moltres for Dark Energy, a couple Energy Search, a couple Energy Switch, and a couple Energy Search. Using that Dire Flame Wings ability, plus Raihan, plus Attach, Aura Burn, go ahead and knock out a Mew with a 2-prize Pokemon. So Galarian Moltres V isn't a deck on its own, at least at the time of recording this video, but it can be tossed into a plethora of decks along with some energy and energy switches, and it can make good use of itself against other decks, but especially against Dark Weak decks like Mew VMAX. Now let's talk about the indirect counters. I think YouTube removed the thumbs down button or something, so I guess you'll all have the thumbs up here for Crushing Hammers. Crushing Hammers and Fan of Waves are some very popular indirect counters against Mew V Max Genesect V, the deck, because they run a finite amount of the energies that they need to use. The list that runs 4 special and 2 basic for a total of 6 is going to be weak to any type of energy removal. But Fan of Waves is great against Mew V Max because, like I said, the popular list has about an 80-20 split, with special energy being the heavy split, and Fan of Waves is always going to hit against a Mew V Max unless they're lucky and their turn 1 and turn 2 attachments are both Fog Crystal / Psychic Energy. Fog Crystal to get the Psychic Energy, or they just have the raw Psychic Energy. Fan of Waves always hits against decks that are running either all special energy or a lot of special energy, whereas Crushing Hammer is going to be a chance, of course, but it can be much stronger, and Crushing Hammer can also be good against decks that are not running special energy, whereas Fan of Waves is only good against decks running special energy. You'll see there was this kind of popular split going on with the Hammer Fan. I played, well, actually, John Mastowi played 4 Hammer, 2 Fan in his Wheezing deck. I took his Wheezing deck and made some changes, and we will talk about that list in this video, actually. And I still played the 4 Hammer, 2 Fan. Tate Whitesell and I played 4 Hammer, 2 Fan in our Suicune Hammers deck. I saw somebody play 4 Hammer, 2 Fan in an Ice Rider deck. There was something else that was 4 Hammer, 2 Fan as well, but that just seems like the way to go, because those 2 fans are going to be great against Mew and Single Strike, but then they're bad against things that are playing all basic energy, so then that's where the Crushing Hammers come in, but the Crushing Hammer is good against everything. Team Yell Grunt, Flannery, Sydney. These are not being played right now, but they do have potential. Sydney has some potential because you look at your opponent's hand and get rid of a combination of tool cards, special energy, and 2 stadium cards. So you can get rid of 2 specials, 2 stadiums, 2 tools, 1 or 1 and 1, whatever. But this is also good against Mew because you can get rid of extra stadiums in their hand and then play down Path to the Peak, and they can't bump it if you just got rid of their stadium. So I think Sydney is also a card that could see some play, but it would have to be in a deck that doesn't need to aggressively play their own supporters, and playing Sydney is fine for them for a turn. Flannery, in a similar way, you get to discard that special energy instead of Fan of Waves, but having a supporter that might be useless against half the decks is a lot worse than having a Fan of Waves item that's useless against half the deck. So I think that's why we're always going with Fan of Waves. And then Team Yell Grunt, I think I'd just always have Crushing Hammer than Team Yell Grunt and take a 50-50 chance to actually discard the energy instead of just give it back to my opponent. So Ability Lock. Ability Lock is going to be very good because, like I mentioned, they are playing Peony and no draw supporters in a lot of these lists, and Genesect V is what's going to do everything for them. So if you can lock their abilities and they don't bump that stadium, or they don't move the Galarian Weezing out of the active, they might not be able to draw cards, and then they can't attach energy, and they can't evolve, and they can't use their attacks, and they're stuck for X amount of turns. And I have Galarian Weezing gameplay on this channel from a recent tournament. I got top 8 with it, if you're interested in seeing that. But yeah, the ability lock one's pretty simple. It's just that, you know, they need to draw cards with Genesect because they're not drawing cards with Research and Marnie. They're not searching out cards with Drizzile and Teleon like other decks are. So this deck is very unique in the way it's built because it has its own engine that was given to it with the Genesect V. So it has really hard counters in this ability lock. Next is Galar Mine. This one might be a weird one, but Mew VMAX has to... so something I should have mentioned earlier is Cross Fusion Strike. When it copies Techno Blaster, Techno Blast says this Pokemon can't attack next turn. So that means that Mew VMAX that copied Techno Blast, it has to retreat and switch, or switch and retreat. It has to go to the bench and come back. Galar Mine can stop that because Mew VMAX has free retreat. So that's something that deck relies on. It goes in knowing, okay, I can retreat and then get a switch, and then we're out of there. So that either makes them need an extra switch, or bump the stadium, or have Balloon in their deck. But Balloon also, we're playing 2 Tool Jammers in this Galarian Weezing deck that I said I was going to talk about, which is now on the screen. And you'll see that 4 Hammer, 2 Fan of Waves. That's kind of catching on as the thing to do if you're trying to do energy denial to counter Mew VMAX and some other decks. But I think Galar Mine is an underrated tool against Mew VMAX. And this one, I don't have a list for it because I thought of it while making this video, but Max really likes items, and Vikavolt V's Paralyzing Bolt says they can't play any items. So if you bossed up or cross-switchered up or Pokemon catchered up a Genesect and put down Galar Mine and swung with Paralyzing Bolt, a Max Genesect deck is probably going to draw some cards and pass because they can peony, sure, they can peony. They can draw cards with Genesect, but they can't play the cross switchers if you use Paralyzing Bolt. They can't play Switch if you use Paralyzing Bolt. They can't attach an air balloon if you use Paralyzing Bolt. Sure, they can play down a stadium and bump the Galarian Mine or the Galar Mine and attach an energy to Genesect, but they're going to need more than just one energy. Or, you know, they can play Elisa Sparkle and attach an energy and bump the Galar Mine, and if they get all that in one turn, good for them. We'll try again next turn. Another cool thing is if they can't, even if they do get all that, if we're playing Toughness Cape on our Vikavolt V, they can't one-shot Vikavolt V without power tablets. So you Toughness Cape this little guy, Paralyze and Bolt for 50, they swing into you. You say, okay, I'm going to play down Galar Mine, you can't use items, and then I'm going to Paralyze and Bolt you again, and even though you just smacked me for 210 damage and my Toughness Cape's saving me, and I only have 50 HP left, you'll have to have another Mew set up on the bench in order to attack this turn because you can't free retreat with the Galar Mine out and you can't use switches because I item locked you. So I think there's a lot of cool stuff going on here. I think Vikavolt V is very weak in general in the current metagame, but it sounds like in a perfect world you could use this to counter Mew VMAX, and maybe the day after this video comes out, I have a crazy concoction trying this out. It doesn't sound like it would be good in general, but it sounds like it would be very annoying for Mew VMAX to take care of. And that's what this whole video is about. I'm trying to give you guys these ideas and strategies. That's why it's not like, here's a deck list that beats Mew VMAX. I could just give you, here's Eternus VMAX, here's Gengar VMAX, they're dark type, have fun. That's obvious. I think anybody can do that as long as they have an understanding of the game. What I'm here to do in this video is show you guys some more abstract ideas and hope that somebody runs with it and makes something crazy. So that's kind of what this Vikavolt V portion really was for. Next, we have single prizers. So single prizers have been off the map because you got everybody sniping and spreading damage, and Inteleon pings, Jolteon VMAX, Dragapult, Horror Energy, Rapid Strike, Urshifu, everywhere. No bench Pokemon is safe if they're under 120 HP or whatever, right? Well, now we've got a lot of straightforward decks that are hitting what's actually in the active. Mew VMAX, not damage spread. Single strike decks all around, not damage spread. Suicune, not damage spread. Leafeon, not damage spread. Zacian Zamazenta, not damage spread. All just hitting what's in the active. So these single prizers now have a shot at actually trading favorably with a lot of the popular decks, and actually the top 3 decks. Mew VMAX, Single Strike, and Suicune are the top 3 decks. Suicune can do some stuff because it has the Inteleon, so it does have the ping damage, and it does have some single prizers in its deck that can actually be used to attack with, but not so much for the other decks. So I think these on the screen, but also just single prizers in general, right now in the metagame, have more potential than they did prior to Fusion Strike. So that's also just something to chew on there. And we have seen people playing Malamar and Regidrago and Morpeko a little bit more at a time. So there might be other Pokemon out there that are just waiting to be experimented with. And lastly, walls, high HP, tanking. We'll talk about the big charm first, because that one's kind of like, you're probably looking at the screen like, why is there a big charm on it? That's not a Mew VMAX counter. So the big charm's there because what I was thinking was, you know, you take a 320 HP Pokemon that's good at tanking. I already have a big charm in my Inteleon VMAX Rapid Strike Inteleon VMAX deck, but you take a chunky Pokemon, you know, you got Arctozolt, you got Inteleon VMAX from Rebel Clash, you got Inteleon VMAX from the new set, from Fusion Strike, you got Jolteon VMAX, just something you can tank a hit no matter, even if they hit all of their power tablets in one turn. But like a deck that can tank a hit and Cheryl and reattach, just that general idea, I think is something that can be scary to Mew VMAX. I thought about Sandaconda VMAX. I actually built a deck with it to tank with Stone Energy and Big Charm and Cheryl every turn while you're spreading 30 damage to all the bench. Also, something just small to keep in mind is spread damage, but I'm not sure that's really a direct counter to Mew VMAX because that's not seeming to work right now. But just because most Mew decks aren't playing the Oricorio, so spread damage is kind of okay. But yeah, just high HP Big Charm because Mew VMAX wants to be aggressive and go knockout, knockout, knockout. Or like hit something and then knock it out in the 2-shot and then save up all its power tablets and one-shot another VMAX. It doesn't want to play a slow game. It goes through its resources very fast. So just slowing down the game with something like a Big Charm Shell strategy sounds appealing to me. But also things that are just directly walls or tanking, like Duraludon VMAX's Skyscraper, prevent all damage done to this by Pokemon that have special energy, and also Zamazenta's Dauntless Shield, specifically the Zamazenta build I featured on the channel a couple days ago, that's much more Zamazenta focused than it is Zacian. And I also thought the Averys in Grant Manley's list were interesting, not only against Suicune to lower their bench, but against Mew to drop a couple Genesects off and a couple less cards they'll be drawing from the Fusion Strike engine. So that is where we're going to end it today. Let me know if I missed something that you think can counter the Mew VMAX Genesect deck in the description. You can't edit the description, in the comments down below. And I hope you all enjoyed this video. Be sure to subscribe to the channel for daily Pokemon TCG content. Leave a like and a comment. Check out all my sponsors in the description down below. There we go. That's where the description down below part was supposed to be. Also, follow me on Twitch. Thanks for watching. Have a great day. And I'll see you next time here on Celio's Network.